Hi there. Today we're going to solve more two-step equations in the form P times the quantity x plus q equals r. An equation like 2 times the quantity w plus 36 equals 114 is in the form P times the quantity x plus q equals r. That's because it contains two factors, P and x plus q. It's considered a two-step equation. So the P here is 2, and the x plus q is a w plus 36. To solve equations in the form P times the quantity x plus q equals r, our first step is to divide each side by the factor P, because it's considered a multiplication equation, so we're going to undo it by dividing. And then the next step is to solve the one-step addition and subtraction equation. So basically whatever the quantity was inside the parentheses. Here's our first example. We have 3 times the quantity x plus 5 equals 45. Again, we're considering 3 and x plus 5 factors. So this is actually a multiplication equation. So what we're going to do first is we're going to divide by 3 because each side is being multiplied by 3. So this 3 divided by 3 cancels out, and I'm left with x plus 5 equaling 45 divided by 3 is 15. So now I'm just left with this one-step addition equation where my variable x is being added by 5. So to undo that, we're going to subtract by 5 on both sides of the equation. Notice I brought my equal signs down. So 5 minus 5 cancels out to 0, and I'm left with x equaling 10. Okay, and if you just wanted to check your solution, you can always plug it in back into the original equation. So instead of the x, I put the 10. So 3 times 15, that does equal 45. Okay, so if ever you want to check your solution, just plug it back into the equation. Here's our next example. 2 times the quantity x plus 4 equals 18. So our P is 2. So I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides of the equation because that's the number being multiplied by the quantity. So 2 divided by 2 cancels out to 1. So what I'm actually left with on the left is x plus 4. And then 18 divided by 2 is 9. Okay, so now I have this one-step addition equation. So now I'm just going to undo my plus 4 and I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides of the equation. Okay, and then 4 minus 4 cancels out to 0. So on the left, I'm equal to x, and on the right, I have x equaling 5. Here's our second example. Again, our P is 5 because that's the number that's being multiplied over here times this quantity n minus 2. So let's divide by 5 on both sides of the equation. So 5 divided by 5 cancels out. So I'm left with n minus 2 equaling negative 15. I'm sorry, not negative 15, negative 6. Sorry, guys. So now I'm looking at my variable n, and it's being subtracted by 2. So the opposite of minus 2 is going to be to add 2 on both sides of the equation. Okay, and then minus 2 plus 2 cancels out to 0. So on the left, I'm left with n. Let me bring down my equal signs. And negative 6 plus 2 is going to equal negative 4. So our solution is negative 4. Here's another example like number 2. Again, our P, or the number being multiplied times the quantity, is 4. And it's being multiplied, so let's divide both sides by 4. Okay, 4 divided by 4 cancels down to 1. So I'm left with 5 plus b equals negative 3. Okay, so now I have my variable b, and it's being added to 5. So to get rid of this plus 5 over here, we're going to subtract 5 on both sides of the equation. So 5 minus 5 cancels out to 0. I'm left with just b on the left, and then negative 3 minus 5 equals negative 8. So our solution is negative 8. So these past couple examples that I've given you were just integers. Now I'm going to start giving you some with rational coefficients, so the fractions and the decimal. So this first one right here, 2/3 times the quantity n plus 6 equals 10. Okay, the number that's multiplied by the quantity is 2/3. So remember in a couple lessons ago, we talked about if your coefficient is a fraction, you need to multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply 2/3 times 3/2. Okay, so when I do that, 3/2 times 2/3 cancels out to 1. So I'm left with n plus 6. And then I'm going to have 10 times 3/2. That equals 15. Okay, because 10 times 3 is 30. And then over 2, that equals 15. Okay, so we now have n plus 6 equaling to 15. So now we're going to look at our variable n. It's being added plus 6. So to have the inverse of that means to subtract 6 from both sides of the equation. And we're left with n equaling 9. Okay. Here's another one with a fractional coefficient. We know we love those. So we know that the fractional coefficient is 1/2. So we're going to multiply it times the reciprocal. And the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2 over 1. Okay? So 2 over 1 times 1/2, that cancels out to just 1. So we're actually left with w minus 4. And that equals 10. So now our variable w is being subtracted by 4. So let's add 4 to both sides of the equation. Okay, minus 4 plus 4 cancels out to 0. So I'm left with just w, and that's going to equal 14. Okay, all right. So let's move on. We have now our coefficients are going to be decimals. And decimals you can just kind of treat just the same as you would with integers. It's being multiplied by 0.2. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide by 0.2 on both sides of the equation. Okay, so what we're going to be left with on the left side is c minus 3. And then negative 10 divided by 0.2 is going to equal negative 50. Okay, now our variable c is being subtracted by 3. So let's do the inverse of that and add 3 on both sides of the equation. So negative 3 plus 3, that cancels out to 0. So c is going to equal negative 47. Again, you can check this work by plugging in negative 47 into this original expression or equation. Okay, here's another example. So negative 4 times w minus 7 equals 18. Again, our coefficient is 0.4, so it's being multiplied. So let's divide by 0.4 on both sides of the equation. This cancels out to 1. So I'm left with w minus 7, and that equals 45. Okay, so we're taking a look at our variable w being subtracted by 7. So let's add 7 on both sides of the equation because we're doing the inverse. This cancels out, so w is going to equal 52. Alrighty, so now we're going to just get into some real-life applications for more two-step equations. Jamal and two cousins received the same amount of money to go to a movie. Each boy spends $15. Afterwards, the boys had $13 together. Write an equation to find the amount of money each boy received. Okay, so the hardest part again about this is actually setting up the equation and understanding what it actually means. So we have Jamal and two cousins. So that's 3 people altogether. Okay, so next you're going to look at it and it says each boy spent $15. So we know that they had a certain amount of money. We really don't know what that is. Let's call it M. And they spent $15, so we're going to subtract the $15. So that means afterwards they had $30 altogether. So this is supposed to equal $30 here. Okay, so again, this is Jamal and two cousins. There are these 3 boys, and they spent, they had this much money minus the $15 that they spent, and altogether they had $30 left. So the point is to find out how much did they each start off with, this M over here. So first let's divide by 3 on both sides of the equation. And 3 divided by 3 equals 1. So we're left with M minus 15 equals $10. So now we're trying to take a look at how much money did we start off with? Well, let's take a look at our variable M being subtracted by 15. Let's add 15 on both sides of the equation. And then negative 15 plus 15, that cancels out to 0. So M is going to equal 25. So each boy started off with $25. And let's just check if that's true. You had $25 and you spent 15. So 25 minus 15, that equals $10 for each boy. And since there were 3 boys, that equals $30, and that kind of matches up here. So this is a good way to kind of check yourself after you've come up with your equation and your answer. Here's my last example. Javier bought 3 bags of balloons for a party. He used 8 balloons from each bag. Write and solve an equation to find how many balloons were originally in each bag if there's 21 balloons left over. So we already know that we had 3 balloons. We don't know how much he started off with, so let's just call it B. But we know that we used 8 balloons, so we're going to subtract 8 because we used it. All right, and that's supposed to be 21 balloons left over. Okay, so let's go ahead and divide by 3 on both sides of the equation. So B is going to B minus 8 is going to equal 21. Oh, sorry. 21 divided by 3 is 7. Okay, so now take a look at our variable B. It's being subtracted by 8. So let's add 8 to both sides of the equation. And we get B equaling 15. So there was 15 balloons in each bag originally. All right, so today we solved 2-step equations of the form P times the quantity X plus Q equals R. Hope that video was helpful. Thank you. Bye.